Wondering how passion and intrinsic motivation can revolutionize your music teaching? Tune into this inspiring episode where our guest explores these key elements in music education, sharing insights on how a student centered approach can cultivate lifelong musicians and invigorate your classroom.
Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We are glad to be back with you today. Okay, so we had another awesome guest. I feel like we've got a new great friend for life as well.
Yeah, we speak the same language.
I know.
We geek out on the same things.
Yes, it was really fun to hear Stephen talk about just, how he approaches music education and how he thinks about, the needs of his students and what he wants for them, their goals, right? Stephen talked so many times about how he wanted these lifelong musicians, these lifelong learners, lifelong lovers of music. And that's exactly what we've been talking about as well.
Yeah. And just, really took some time to really think about how he wants to accomplish that and what works and what doesn't work. Right. I mean, something might seem work short term, but does it really work long term for his kids? And yeah.
And just because that's how we've been doing it, does that mean that that's necessarily the way to continue? And I think that's a really important message for all of us to think about.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, before we get to the interview, do you feel like you're drowning in lesson plans and wish that you had a musical support system in your corner? Well, grab your favorite mug because we have just the thing for you, and that's the Pass the Baton Coffee Club.
For less than the cost of that fancy latte, you'll unlock a treasure trove of free resources. Get invited to our monthly planning parties, think virtual coffee break with amazing lesson ideas, and score sweet discounts on music education goodies in our store.
Or if you just want to lend a hand to the Pass the Baton mission of empowering music teachers and music students, you can become a supporter, only $2 a month.
Think of it as a way to fuel your passion, elevate your teaching, and connect with a vibrant community of music educators.
So be sure to check out the link. It's in the show notes. You can learn more and you can join the coffee club today. You deserve it. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are really excited to be joined by our guest today, Stephen Cox. Stephen, we were just lucky and found you on social media. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can just start with you introducing yourself a little bit and telling us about your background.
Yeah, sure. So again, my name's Stephen, and I've taught in Texas for 14 years. Before that, I was a student in Texas. I grew up in a rural environment, and at some point, the accent will give me away. But I grew up in a small town. I did the band program there. We actually have this organization called the ATSSB, the Association of Texas Small School Bands. And so I participated in their events and their all-state and stuff whenever I was in high school. But I had this counter influence at the same time that, there were some casual music makers in my home. So like my dad's a campfire guitarist. When he was in high school, he learned like 5 or 6 guitars at 5 or 6 chords on the guitar at Scout Camp, and then never learned any more, right? But he like goes to bluegrass jam sessions every month, and he knows all these songs, and he's an Uber driver occupationally right now, but he still makes music every single week, right? And then the other influence was my grandfather. My grandfather was he was double drafted. He was drafted for World War II and also for Korea. So that's his age range. And when I was growing up, he would make us mixtapes and mail us mixtapes. I bet a lot of people's grandparents were not doing that in late 80s, early 90s, but he would mail those to me. And so I was listening to the music that he grew up with. So that would be like big band jazz and stuff. And so I fell in love especially with the clarinet. And so at some point I started playing the clarinet, and I wanted to be able to do the things that I heard in those old recordings. I wanted to sound like Artie Shaw or Sidney Bechet. And so I had a lot of drive to do that. And I was the kind of kid that, I was in this small town, but there was a college nearby. I wound up going there. It's Howard Payne University, only 1,100 students at this school. But they had this really great professor, Steve Gocher, who was this amazing jazz musician, doubled on the woodwinds. He became my idol. I wanted to be able to do everything he did. I couldn't, but I knew that I needed to be playing. So I was this local kid. I would take and book gigs like I had a jazz band when I was like 15 years old. And once the gig was booked and I had the money, I would call the college kids and be like, I've got this gig if you guys want to come play. So basically, I bribed the college kids into playing with, and it was just kind of industrious like that. Anyway, I got into school thinking I was not going to be a teacher. There's no way. My grandparents had actually been teachers. My mother was a teacher for like a hot minute, like a year or something. And they were all very confident. And the way they talked about it really bothers me now. It was like, you can do something better than be a teacher. And me now, I'm like, there is nothing better than helping people. And that's what teachers do the whole time, right? So anyway, I wound up changing my mind in college, but a lot of it had to do with, I remember when I was growing up, my band directors, they seemed exhausted. The system seemed broken to me. Like as a kid, like it didn't always fit me very well, especially because I was very, very intrinsically motivated, and the system seemed to all be built around extrinsic motivation. Trips and contests and all these things that for me were perfunctory. I just wanted to go practice. I just wanted to play. I wanted to perform, So anyway, at some point in college, I kind of switched around my thinking and thought, well, if I'm in charge of the band, then I can do something different. It doesn't have to be the same. And then I got out of school. I got this really random teaching job at this little private school, and I was so terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was going to change the world, and I couldn't get the band in tune, right? I had no idea what I was doing. Spent a couple of years there, learned a lot. And then I came out to the rural town of Eastland, where I wound up spending 10 years. I started out with a really great mentor who really knew how to make a band sound good, right? Very, very traditional Texas band director, but really brilliant musician and amazing ears. And I learned so much. He retired after I worked with him for 2 years, and I took his gig. So small school Texas, it was two band directors, a high school and a middle school band director, but you did all the things. So my entire career, I taught 6 through 12. So I would start kids out in 6th grade, and I'd have them for 7 years inside of my class. And so that by the time, they get their braces off when they start, and then you write their college recommendation letters, like that's a wild experience. And so I got really fortunate at that gig. After my mentor, Terry, after he retired, I was able to hire my friend Jet. Like, he was the same age as me. We had very differing strengths. And he was from that town, so I was able to convince him to come there. See, in rural environments, just getting somebody to come out and do the job is so hard because people don't want to live in rural towns on large. That's why there aren't as many people in them. Now, there's a lot of amazing things in rural environments and amazing people and kids and so much potential, but it's hard to get people out there. But I convinced Jet to come join me. And we learned so much together. This was like, we started working together. It was our 5th year teaching, both of us. We taught together for 8 years and had amazing adventures there. And that's where I started my step towards progressive music education, giving the kids more control over the decision making, spending more time building community. And we had some really cool, traditional success highlights. They were very good at our adjudication system, UIL. We performed at Midwest and at state marching contest and all these things. And we had amazing students, like really great kids, wonderful community support. Eventually, we were able to hire a 3rd director. We had around 300 students total, around 90 in the high school. Every single student did required beginner band at that school. And I did that for 10 years. And oh, have I got stories. And then, there came kind of this nexus point where I don't know if you heard of it, but there's like this global pandemic.
Yeah, vaguely remember that.
And unfortunately,
it pushed me a little further down the path of just thinking about what the actual goals are for the students. Yeah. I think the assumed goal is the band is going to sound as good as humanly possible, right? Like, that's the assumed goal. That's what we're adjudicated on. The people at the quote unquote top of the profession, they're the bands that sound the best. But that doesn't necessarily equate to student well-being or individual student success or lifelong musicianship or all these other goals that I was thinking about, the biggest one being stability, mental health, inclusion, and things. And I started to see that the model that we were working in, as progressive as we felt like we were, still missed a lot of these gaps. And so we kept on experimenting. Not long after the pandemic, another nexus point was in 2022, I was the Grammy Music Educator of the Year, and that was a whole thing. That was really cool. But I spent a week like in the middle of the music industry, like, sat next to the CEO of Sony Music and talked to performers and copyright attorneys who are hilarious, apparently. Um, and I got the sense that there was this big thing we were missing, because in music education, we're very skeptical of the popular music world. And now those people probably had to be nice to me to some extent, but it seemed very genuine that they cared about what we were doing and felt like it was important. And I think most people do when you get down to it, you know? So I came back and a lot of things changed at my district. The superintendent left. There was a lot of water shifting. And, my family sat down. We're like, if we're going to do something different, now's the time to do it. So I looked for my ideal job, and that was this school in San Antonio that was a complete mess, where the band program had been unsuccessful for 10 years, where there was no football team, so there was no marching band, and there was complete flexibility. So basically, I would describe this job as no self-respecting band director would take this job, and I'm like, it's perfect for me. That's it. I'm ready to go. So I came out to San Antonio thinking I was going to go with more of a New Orleans style street band, like get the kids really getting into improvisation, and the school's in downtown San Antonio. And I thought we can just march the kids out into the street and like go perform. There's like performing venues all over the place within a mile of the school. I got there, and what I quickly found out was that all the kids were entering this school in ninth grade, having never played an instrument, never been in a music class at all. And so you can hand a ninth grader a trumpet and say, hey, kid, in 3 years, you'll sound as good as the freshmen everywhere else. Most kids are not going to do that. Like, it's not that it's impossible, it's that it's psychologically really difficult. So this led me to look into something that was more accessible to just the general population of the school. So I started a popular music education program there, alongside still having a WIN program. The WIN program only had like 30 kids signed up for it, and half of those kids were actually in the music appreciation class, which I found about on day one. That's great. I walked into music appreciation. I go, hey, this is apparently music appreciation. Why do you guys sign up for this? And they said, we didn't sign up for this. What are you talking about? This is one up on our schedules. So very quickly after I convinced the district to let me do this, I grabbed the Music Will curriculum, which is published by Hal Leonard, and got a hold of, like, at first I brought my instruments, so guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, very accessible instruments. You hand a kid a guitar and say, you can be writing songs and, playing in a band here in, a few weeks to a couple months. They'll do that. They're like, I can give you a set. So we went from like 30 kids enrolled to 160 by the end of the week, which was a new problem. But
yeah.
we didn't have instruments for 9 weeks, so I spent 9 weeks being like, I swear this is going to happen. There's going to be instruments, and we're like doing ear training and music games and stuff with a bunch of San Antonio inner city high school kids that are like, who is this weird guy and what has he done with my schedule, right? But it worked pretty well that year. The second year, we saw 250 students signed up. And so they let me hire another director. By the end of that, we had 20 student-led groups that the students were completely student-led. Like, literally, they came to class, they checked in with us, they went into a room, they picked their music, they did their rehearsals, they did the entire thing. Very, very large beginner classes of 50 or 60 kids on drums, bass, guitar, and piano. We wound up with a full instrumentation jazz band that the students, basically the rule was they went through the Hal Leonard website, they picked the pieces that they wanted to play, and then I would not rehearse them until they could play it. So like they would do in class sectionals. That group went from not, like, the first year I was there, we had a Veterans Day thing, and we spent literally from the moment I saw them until November 11th or whatever, just learning the national anthem. And I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? The second year, that group by the second semester could put together a grade 2 or 3 jazz chart, like in a week or two, without me having to walk them through much in the way of rhythms or anything. Like, they would get together in sectionals and just go for it. And so that was a big, big shift. And then we had an after school completely student-led jazz combo. So anyway, that's kind of the arc of it. This year, I had an opportunity to go join a music education nonprofit called Willis Wonderland. I'll talk more about that later. But now I'm spending all my time developing basically progressive music education resources. We're starting with songwriting. So I've been working with this organization to create a bunch of free songwriting resources. And that's the arc.
Wow.
That was a lot. I'm sure people have already turned it off. There's nobody listening.
No, they are captivated. They go, where? What next? This is awesome. There's just so many different directions we could go. And I feel like we're going to hit on a lot of them. But one thing that really intrigued me when I was kind of, stalking you on social media was one of the videos that you put out that talked about leading with passion. And I feel like everything you just said was touching on that, but maybe could you dig a little bit deeper? What does that mean? And help our listeners.
So I think, whenever I started this most recent program, which is so great, you start out and you're so bad. And I'm like, I'm currently the best version of myself so far, which is really nice. So I meet people now and they'll give me a compliment. I go, yeah, but 10 years ago, I sucked at that. So when I started this program, I wanted to come up with a code, just, 3 words to kind of center the program. And I said, joy, community, and passion. As being what I wanted to center the program on. Things I left out of that were like pursuit of excellence, champions, like it was like joy, community, passion. So whenever I talk about passion, I mean that you care about something, you're excited about it, and most importantly, you believe in it. When I talk about passion with students, I want to develop intrinsic motivation. I want the push in the program to come from them. I really, really believe that whenever the drive and the push come from the students, and then I'm just there to like make it a little more efficient and help them stay organized and to, be able to advocate for them. That's a big part of it. That's the winning formula. And I think that's probably true, not just for music, but for anything we're teaching to students. There is this thing that kind of permeates all of education and really governance in general, I think, where we believe that left to their own devices, the kids would never do anything productive, and that it's our job to force them to do all of these things that we, the adults, have decided are important. And my observation was when I did that, it was terrible. Like the kids were unhappy, I was unhappy, and the results weren't as good. Like in the short term, I might could force some temporary results out of people, but like the long-term results that really matter, that only happens whenever passion is developed. And we have a major issue in instrumental music education that I think permeates our entire culture. And that's that once our kids get out of school, by and large, they never touch an instrument again. And I think that's a problem. I think that if we change that to where, I don't know, 25, 30, 50, 80% of them continued making music in some capacity, it would literally change the world. And I fully believe that. And I think it's possible. So anyway, that's kind of where my shift is. That's where my sense of what passion is.
Yeah. And it's so cool too, because I think people do worry about like, if I make a shift towards empowering students, like what happens to the quality of musicianship, right? But I hear you saying, and we know as well too, like, no, it will be there, if not even more, because the kids know how to fix it, because the kids are in charge of their learning, so that's cool.
I think there's 2 traps that people fall into on this, because I've seen people that, like, normally when I speak about these things, like if there's a criticism, it's, well, that sounds really nice, but it can't actually work, right? I'm sure you've experienced that. Like, that sounds nice, but actually, forcing the kids to do all this stuff has worked really well for me, and I don't want to change that, is kind of the substance, right? And what I think is number one, anytime, like when I started shifting to trying to be a more progressive music educator, and I use that word progressive to mean student-centered. I have to be really careful with that word, because in the state of Texas, using the word progressive to describe yourself is like saying you're an axe murderer. Because of the political connotations of the world. But when I say progressive, I mean student-centered, focused on them, their experience, their outcomes, and not on being system-centered or director-centered, right? So whenever I started making that shift, I was bad at it. It was like I was a new teacher again. I was very uncomfortable. I didn't just go, oh, well, I think that this is the right direction to go. And then I was just marvelous at it, and the results were amazing up front. Like, it's a craft unto its own to figure out how to do this. And the biggest thing is, You have to think about how you're going to define success. Because if defining success is my vision as I see it is executed perfectly by these other people, you're probably not going to achieve that success. But if your sense of success is my students are going to be empowered and excited, they're going to practice way more, they're going to have amazing individual results, the atmosphere is going to be better in my room, they're going to be much more likely to keep playing instruments later, and I'm going to be happier and they're going to be happier. If those are the results you're focused on, I don't think there's another way to do it other than to empower the students. So yeah, I think those are the traps, though. The traps are it's uncomfortable, it's hard. All of this stuff is actually harder than just telling the kids what to do and forcing them to do it. That's easy. That's why, even though there's lots of evidence behind, progressive ideas in education, they don't happen because they're harder. And yeah, so that's my sense of it anyway.
Well, and I think the harder just also comes from our mindset, because for many of us, that's not how we learned. And, the idea, well, when I was in band, it was like this and I turned out great. There's that mentality, but it's right. What about all of my classmates who are in band with me that don't even acknowledge the fact that they play an instrument? That's what I think is so important. The other thing that we hear a lot is, well, yeah, but my administration expects, whatever. What do you tell people when you hear those?
Well, I would say that there's a few different thoughts about the administrative side of this. First of all, we are so much luckier than math teachers in this regard. Like when we really get down to it, we usually have a lot more autonomy than what we give ourselves credit for.
Yes.
Most teachers I talk to, their administrator is in their room an average of 1 or 2 times a year, and they're at, if they're lucky, one event. And many people, their administrator has never been to an event. So the first thing that I think most administrators want is they want, not to be fielding calls about you all the time and things going on and angry parents and angry kids. And then a lot of times there is some type of output expectation, but I don't think you have to sacrifice having concerts and performances in order to empower the kids. I think those things go together, but I do think your focus can't be on those things. If you take something like adjudication and, put the equivalency of like a math teacher who's only focused on star testing, we would all say that's bad. But it's very common for us to put an enormous amount of focus, energy, effort into our adjudications. Whereas, it's, I have a real complicated time with adjudication in general. I've been very successful at it. And I think I could go and continue to be very successful in almost any environment because I know how to play the game. But I don't like both the cost, I don't like the restrictions, and I don't like the way that especially competition in particular and adjudication by extension, it is never going to result in great music education everywhere by design. So anyway, I think I ADHD drifted on that just a little bit.
Okay.
That's likely to happen again. I don't remember what the question was. That's how good I am at this right now.
That is half the fun of this podcast.
The administrators, right? So
yes.
You have to have a good relationship with your administrators to be successful. Administrators are the one factor at any school that I think are completely, if it's not working, if it's not right, you can't be successful there. And so administrators are a question, but I have found them to be more flexible. If I go in with a belief and a justification and, if the students and parents are happy and what we're doing is not embarrassing in some way, and I can advocate for it, I can usually get it done. But I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. And I understand that.
Yeah. I think I've also learned you kind of, people get stuck in the, this is the box that I'm in. And I think sometimes when you think, okay, what can I do? Instead of all the, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't change this. Well, within what you have to do, is there a little place that you could just change it a little bit, right? I mean, for us, in my general music, we didn't like that we were putting kindergartners on stage in December when we had known them for a hot second. And we just really didn't like that. And it felt like a dog and pony show. And so we asked admin, can we have an informants in the music classroom? Each class has their own informants. And for me, I have my kids come up. We moved it to February, March. And so I know them longer. And by then I asked them, what do you want to do? What do you want to show your parents? Anything we've done in music class is game. And so it's a much more authentic thing. And I didn't break any rules, right? Like they're still performing and all the things, but there was a little bit of wiggle room in there. And I don't know. It's hard to get stuck on but I can't, instead of thinking, but what can you do? Right.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, and again, what are the outcomes that we want? Because what
Mm-hmm.
you did was you made a student-centered decision. This doesn't feel good for the kids. It doesn't feel good
Mm-hmm.
for us. It doesn't feel like music education. It feels like a dog and pony show, is what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Is we
Mm-hmm.
got to prop them out there because this is what we've always done and this is what we need to do. And you're like, it's better for the students if we go this other direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. We will not ever improve education. And it's our job as the people currently alive right now to be continuing to improve education and not to just accept that someone figured it out 200 years ago, right? So if we're going to do that, we have to be willing to go and advocate for those things for sure. It's so interesting. You're talking about performances, and we have this assumed thing that performance is actually a really important component of music making. And my argument would be that actually it's not for everybody. That I did a lot of radical things in my last gig because I had the ability to do it, and I wanted to know if these things could work. So like I ungraded my classroom, so my students recorded themselves every 3 weeks, and they set their goals, they decide what they were going to record, and then once they made the recording and turned it in, because I said I got to have some type of documentation. Here's my parameter. A recording of you playing is way better than me like being like, I don't know, 85, whatever. So they would do that, and then once they recorded, they would submit a piece of paper for what they thought their grade should be for the 3 weeks. And whatever they put there, I put it into the grade book, with one caveat being if I thought their grade was too low, I would raise it. I reserved the right to do that, but I didn't lower grade. If I thought a kid, was a mess and they put 100, I would let them do that. And what I found is that on average, almost every kid graded themselves harder than I would have, which is, I think, probably a symptom of things being wrong in education in general. But I was really pleased because they had control of it and they were choosing their goals. And so I had kids that would do stuff within a semester that I thought would take 5 or 6 years. All because they were working on the things they wanted to. So they were out practicing most students because they'd go home and they'd work on it every single day because it was what they wanted to and they were excited. And you just can't compete with passion in that way. But then I also didn't require them to do performances. So I set up really cool performance that most of the students wanted to do. But if a student wanted to come in and practice every day, even in my large ensemble, if they wanted to come in and practice every single day, so long as they clearly communicated with me, I would allow that. And what happened was I was talking to my grandmother. She passed away a couple years ago. She was 91, and she said she was taking piano lessons when she was 5 years old, and she loved it. And so she's remembering this like 85 years later, right? And she's like, she loved it, loved it, loved it. And the recital came up, and she was so scared of getting on stage that she begged her parents to quit, and then she never played again. And I know so many people that play an instrument casually and it makes their life better, and they're musical people, but they don't feel the need to get out in front of people and show it off. And I think that's okay. And I think there should be room for that in the places that we can create that. I know everybody might not have as radical opinion about it as I do, or they're afraid that if I say you don't have to perform, that none of the kids will want to do it. But that's not been my experience, especially if you're like, it's cool performances of stuff that they like, that they're excited about. They want to do that. They want that experience. So,
but isn't that a problem in itself? Like if we were to say you don't have to perform and none of them wanted to perform, then we really need to reevaluate what we're doing.
Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right. Well, and I just have not found that the experience of forcing kids to do things on average is really good. Like once they decide they're ready, oh my God, they can do anything. But, and sometimes I won't say that I've never been successful in like forcing a kid to improvise. And then after they got done crying about it, they were really happy and excited they'd done it. Like I would say that it's not over 50% though, and I'm not willing to take that risk anymore, because I can get there. I can get there with them, just inviting them in and giving them time and making the environment feel safer. And eventually kids are ready to perform. They're ready to improvise, but they're not on my time scale. They're on their time scale. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I heard two things that I like: the grading whole process. Like, I mean, if you gave them an 85 or whatever you gave them, like the amount of feedback that they would have gotten from the 85 or then them self-reflecting on their own work is like night and day. right? I mean, and even if you had said something past the 85, they wouldn't have heard it. They read 85 and they were done with your assessment.
Mhm.
So that's amazing. And then also, well, I think I lost it, what I was going to say next, but anyways, maybe it'll come back to me. But yeah.
Well, we'll have no shortage of topics to talk about. There's a book
Yeah.
by Susan Bloom called Ungrading that has a bunch of strategies for regular classrooms. I don't hear people talking about it in music classrooms. I would say probably in the band world, we've had a lot of people ungrading for a long time, just like in PE, it's the everyone gets 100 policy, you know? And here's my deal. My hobby is human psychology. I think it's a really good hobby for teachers. I want to know, I like at first, when I started teaching, I go, I know what it takes to be a good musician. I know what balance sounds like. I know how much you need to practice. How do I make the kids do that? That's how I was thinking initially. Like, how do I get them to do that? And then as my process shifted, it became the psychological battle. Because, like if you want to play the trumpet really well, get some decent fundamentals, play the Arbin book from front to back, you're going to be a pretty good trumpet player, right? At least from a traditional reading standpoint. Like it's not hard. That may be a little bit solved. It's the psychology that's hard. And so, how do I convince students that this is worth doing? Well, it became more and more, well, how do I create an environment where they're willing to try? Because I don't have to convince them music is awesome. Music is awesome. It will appeal to many, many people. We teach an incredibly engaging subject matter. But how do I not ruin that? How do I keep that alive? How do I stoke passion and not put it out? And that's became my experience into self-determination theory. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I really, really love the work. It really changed the way I think about everything. One of my friends, she's a professor now, I think in Utah. Her name's Olivia Tucker. And she introduced me to self-determination theory. And then I read every book on it. And then I listened to every podcast and everything. Again, probably an ADHD spiral, but a very useful one. In that, I started to really think about two things, mainly the continuum of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So I'll send you a graphic that I stole from the SDT people that maybe you can pop up during this podcast for the video one. But basically, you look at a continuum from people being extrinsically motivated, which is, carrot and stick. It's I am going to go and practice because I have this contest and I want to win that contest and go on another trip. It is, I am working really, really hard because there's a star chart and I want to see my name at the front of that star chart, right? Extrinsic motivation. Or if I don't do this, if I don't practice, I'm going to get a 65 and my parents are going to be mad. I'm going to get grounded and I'm not going to get to do the thing I want. So completely nothing about the activity, nothing about music, nothing about what you want to do. It's I'm being forced by other people to do these to either get a reward or to do that. And so the extrinsic motivation is very low autonomy. You can only use extrinsic motivation when the power dynamic is in your favor. So like my kids cannot extrinsically motivate me, right? They're not going to convince me, it'll be a standoff because I have the power in the relationship. We're like that as teachers. We have power over them and we have to exert that power in order to do extrinsic motivation. And that feels icky. It feels icky to the students. It feels icky to a lot of teachers I know. So if we move down this continuum, the next one is like where the kids have interjected this feeling. So now I have to see my name at the front of the star chart because I'll feel really bad if I don't. It's not that I necessarily want that or want the prize, but I've internalized all of this and I now have this ego involvement in what's going on. That can be a really powerful motivation, but as soon as you fail, you feel like you're a failure. And you're more likely to quit because that's all it's not really about your values. It's about not wanting to feel bad or wanting to feel good from this activity. And a lot of times that's, again, external pressures on you. You don't have a lot of autonomy over that. That's people whose parents really, really, really want them to play an instrument, but they don't want to. And they feel that internal pressure and they feel like if they're not practicing and not doing well, that they're a bad person. Terrible motivation. As we get further on, we get to like integration, where actually, I see myself as a musician and I practice because I really like the benefits of that. And I believe in doing this. This is good motivation. This is autonomy. This is me choosing the kind of person that I want to be and then doing things that I want. This is a good type of motivation. It's not intrinsic because I may go and do scales and not want to do scales. but I believe in doing scales. I like the benefits. I'm going to do it, and it just makes me feel better to know that I practice for the day because I'm a practicer. And that's, again, high autonomy. And then the furthest rung here is being intrinsically motivated. I like playing my instrument. I like performing. I like going and doing things. Doing this will make me feel good in the moment as I'm doing it. It will be like a massage for my soul. It's intrinsic motivation. So I want my students to be either integrated or intrinsically motivated about everything we do. I never want to be on this end of the spectrum where I'm manipulating them.
Mm-hmm.
And so within the parameters of how I'm conducting my classroom, there's going to be some hard borders that I don't have any choice about. You can't run around stabbing people. Like that's, it's not okay, right? My big one in my most recent gig was you have to be making music in this class. And you have to be making music in a way that doesn't overly disrupt the other people around you. I have lots of paths for you to do that. And if you have one that's better than the one I have, I'm open to talking about that. But when you're in this room, you're making music. And that was my boundary, right? So it's the way that you get people over to this is you meet their psychological needs, the needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So relatedness is being comfortable with the people around you. It's having positive relationships with the students and the teachers. How do you do this? Well, you don't make things high stakes. If things are really high stakes, you immediately damage a lot of relationships. Okay. The way that works is, let's say you're doing a playing test. Well, before the people were making music with you, now they're making music against you. Like what's going on with this? If you take and you have a big high stakes competition coming up, do the students look at their peers that are struggling as people that are just not as far along on their journey? Or do they go, well, they're just not working hard. I can do it. Why can't they do it? Whereas if the goal was just music making, we would be collaborating to make music. And instead, now this person is potentially a barrier to the thing that I want, right? So again, that extrinsic motivation is pushing against actually us building relatedness inside of our classrooms. You take and they need to develop competence. They actually have to be good, and they have to feel like they're improving. That's what really makes this whole thing tick a little bit. When I talk to people about intrinsic motivation and they go, well, they're just going to mess around and not do anything and we're not going to get any results. I'm like, actually, no, you still have to get results. Like it's part of it. They won't be intrinsically motivated if they're terrible, if they sound bad, if it's embarrassing. Right. And so they have to be growing, they have to be improving, which it turns out that if you meet this last one, you'll probably meet the other two. And that's that they need autonomy. They need choice. Meaningful choice in what they're doing. If they have meaningful choices in what they're doing, they're going to feel more ownership in what they're doing. They are going to practice more. They're going to get better. They're going to measure themselves in more authentic ways, which is going to build up that sense of competence. So that changed everything I did, and I'm never going back.
Yep. Yeah. Before Pass the Baton, Kathryn and I had both read the book Drive by Daniel Pink, which is based on that work. And I agree. Once reading that, it was like, oh, now I understand what I need to do differently. It was just that light bulb moment of this, because it's the same for us as adults. We are not different. We still want that same autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And you can think about that in everything we do. You walk into the school building and you have to go to PD and you're like, oh, geez, really? But yet if it's the one that I chose, that seems like it has relevance to what I'm doing, all of that, then I'm excited about it. Our kids are no different.
Yes. Well, and if people want to read more about self-determination theory, if they would like to go on to their own ADHD spiral, then Drive by Daniel Pink is a great way to get into it. I feel like it's the most accessible.
Yeah.
The original book is Why We Do What We Do. I believe that's by Edward Deci. I confuse Richard Ryan and Edward Deci's work because they built the theory together, so I'll confuse them. Alfie Kohn's book, Punished by Rewards, is built all off of self-determination theory. And it's true. In all of these books, they talk about parenting, teaching, and working with employees. And it's the exact same principles the whole time. So I feel like what's going to happen now is we're at this point where we've talked about this and people are like, well, but what are the brass tacks? What are the actual strategies? Yes. How do you actually do this? That's where we're at, isn't it?
Yep. And that's exactly where we are. So like, give us some examples of what we can actually do in the classroom?
Well, so let me start with large ensemble because I feel like
Mhm.
in a class where you have complete autonomy, like what I did, and you're both basically centered on small groups and you have a good facility, well, creating student-led groups, I would love to talk about that in a minute, but there's so much you can do there and it's so open. But then if you're like, but I have a marching band and we have to perform on Friday, how do I
Right.
do this? Okay. So a few things. My continuum on this was I started out being a very traditional band director, silent rehearsals, everybody quiet, do what I tell you to do the whole time. Here's our warm up. It's the same every day. Here we go, right? The first step into the student autonomy playground was just saying, what do you hear? Instead of saying, you're out of tune at measure 12, trumpets, is say, what do you guys hear at measure 12? And what I noticed immediately was, when I first started doing this, they didn't hear anything. They were paying zero attention. They were just going through the motions, right? But then I go, well, what do you hear there? And they all look at me like I'm crazy. And then I go, well, let's play it again. And we play again. And I go, well, what do you hear this time? Now they have opinions. Or it's the other thing I notice is it's better. Like I didn't do anything. I just said, what did you hear? I just turned on their ears and all of a sudden it sounded better. And so I think that's a really big piece of it. And then I start thinking about what are the choices and the things that only I can make as far as the way we rehearse, as far as where we perform, as far as what we do. And so, the easy way into those waters is saying, well, I'm going to pick all the music, I'm going to pick all the performances, but I'm going to let the students choose some of the ways we rehearse. Well, okay, how about this? One of the things I really like is, we can do alternative setups inside of the room, so instead of being in arcs, maybe we're going to like split into a grid and we're going to put, percussion over here and woodwinds over here and brass over here, or we're going to do high winds, low winds, or any of those things could be beneficial for a rehearsal just to make things up. But why don't I let the kids choose that? One of the first things I started letting kids completely do is like band parties, because apparently I don't know what kids like. I don't know what's cool. So like, hey, we need a party committee. You guys need to pull your friends and figure out what you want to do, and then you run the whole thing. We'll talk to the boosters about a budget, but I don't want to have anything to do with that. Just tell me about it and I'll give you the rubber stamp approval, so long as nothing sounds dangerous, right?
Mhm.
That's easy. And this is still maintaining a lot of control, and I'm going to keep moving down this continuum to having less control. Well, a lot of people like doing sectionals, and sectionals are really beneficial. Well, why does the teacher need to lead the sectionals? So one of the things I really believe in is lifelong musicianship. And if your students don't know how to rehearse without you, then guess what they're going to do when they don't have you anymore? They're not going to rehearse. So if the students can take and break into sectionals, and I used to do a leadership team. A lot of people are really happy with that. I stopped doing that type of stuff because I didn't need the hierarchy. And like the best leadership teams have a really servant leader mentality about things. And I don't mind giving kids responsibilities, but I think the term leadership has very mixed feelings about
Yeah.
what you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to be and how people are supposed to respond to you. And so I've become a little more cautious about how I use the term leadership or leadership positions and things. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. So you walk into a situation where there's like 12 clarinet players there together and they've got to work together, and they are terrible at it at first and then they get good at it.
Mhm.
And then, what happens the next time you need a sub? The sub stands in the room and monitors all of them doing their own sectionals and they don't miss the rehearsal. Look at that. We wasted some practice time at the beginning learning how to do sectionals, but now we're good. And you know what you can do? You can write a paper and give them a whole progress of everything to do. Do this for this long, this for this for this for this, and then you can say, okay, now you guys get together the first 5 minutes, write the paper yourself. What are you going to do? You can scaffold into these things, which you have to do. That's part of the craft is you give, like, kids are not used to having any say over anything they do in their entire lives. And just saying, okay, you have say now doesn't heal them from never having any control of anything. You have to build them up, right?
Yeah.
So if we keep going down this, now they're doing their own sectionals. Now they're planning their own parties. Oh my gosh, this is great. Well, start up. What are more decisions we can make? If you want to be kind of daring, let them help pick music. And you don't have to go completely open. You don't have to say like, here's the Howl Leonard website. Do anything you want. You can say, hey, I've found, because, even for adjudication, I'm looking at a group and I'm going, well, here's like 10 pieces we could play. They're the right difficulty level. We have the instruments to cover it. Why not give them 10 different options and say, hey, why don't you guys go listen to all of these and tell me what you think? Or make it completely open for a few pieces.
Yeah.
What I do is I teach them about what the different grade levels mean. So if you pick this piece, it's going to be expected that everyone can play in this range and that you can read these types of rhythms. This is not saying no. This is saying, hey, well, let's come up with a plan to develop these skills by the time this music comes in. And now they have a purpose behind the skills they're learning. It's not just, hey, I'm the teacher and I think you need to be able to learn to count these 16th note patterns. It's, oh, we have music coming that we want to perform in a few months and we don't know how to do this thing. Now, again, this is being responsive, it's being receptive, it's being open. And a lot of times, again, picking pieces, maybe there is a perfect piece that this is the best piece for my band, and I'm 100% sure, and it's the only way we're going to be successful. Fine, but hopefully that's not the only piece of music you're playing. Right. So anyway, that starts to get there. Then, what else could they pick? Could they actually plan performances? Yeah. Could they actually make big decisions like that? 100%. Now, in a large ensemble, this is hard because you have to practice democracy. And people think democracy is voting, and voting is the least interesting thing about democracy, right? Like, come on. Like, we've been manipulated into believing that our power is in voting when our power is in many, many other things, which include forming opinions and doing research and advocating and building consensus and bringing in people and building coalitions. And that's how you actually do these things in a large ensemble. And you have to create space for this, and it costs time, but then you get back that time in other ways. The biggest one being they're more excited, so they work harder, they practice more, and they practice when you're not there.
Mm-hmm. That brings us back to the lifelong musicians. They are musicians because they want to be, and they see that as part of themselves. And that's huge.
Yes. I mentioned Alfie Kohn. Alfie Kohn is hard to listen to for people that are not already down the road because he can be very abrasive. He's very abrasive because he's very sure he's right. And it took me about a year of listening to him before I go, I think he is right. I put an audio book on and my wife was like, you can't have this on when I'm in the room. I can't listen to it. But he's brilliant. He's good. He's a good speaker. And especially if you've already gone down this road. But one of the things that he tends to say is, one of his favorite teachers said, I'm going to give the kids as much control as I can stomach, each year I'm going to try to be able to stomach a little bit more of it. And I think that's not a terrible way to think about it, because for a lot of people, it's scary. It's scary to let go of the reins. And I don't think you have to let go of the reins entirely all at once. No. Because in fact, I think that would be a disaster for a lot of people. But you can certainly start making little steps towards giving the kids more control. And I think the dividends, they don't pay off the first day necessarily, but within a few weeks of making little changes, I think you'll see dividends in like how excited the kids are. And listen, if you're a large ensemble instructor, you still have to know your craft. You still have to teach the kids all the fundamentals about how to hear balance and how to hear tone and get all those goals. But then within making music, there's like 1,000 micro decisions that normally the director makes because, well, I'm the artist and the conductor and whatever else, that actually all these decisions are good. And so long as we're making musical decisions, we're doing way better than a lot of ensembles. And if the kids are pitching in on that, well, then all of a sudden those decisions start happening at the individual seat level without anyone saying a word. That's how groups play in tune consistently. Is not that the director is really good at tuning. It's that every individual is checked in and they know what to listen for. And you have to build all of that. But then whether we crescendo or decrescendo a particular phrase does not matter. Rather exactly how we do it, so long as we have a good, reasonable sound concept, the kids can make a lot of decisions, even on the artistry standpoint. And again, what's our goal? Is our goal to produce an amazing ensemble or to raise up the next generation of amazing, passionate musicians? And I think we can do both, but you can also just do one by accident.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if somebody were listening and they're buying it, but they're just not sure what the first step should be. Like, what's that thing that I would do tomorrow? What would you suggest?
Well, I think I started this. So I'm going to say the same thing I said a minute ago, and that is stop telling them what you hear and start asking them what they hear. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the obvious one. I saw Barbara Lambridge, amazing conductor. I saw her at an all-region thing, and I just noticed that she constantly asked the kids. This is like Socrates up there, right? What is this? What do you think of this? Have you heard about this? And at first, the kids were like deer in the headlights, and then they started engaging. Yeah. And not every kid said stuff out loud, but I'd listen whenever they were on their breaks, and they'd all be talking about the things that were brought up and stuff, right? Like just creating the space for the kids to even feel a part of making decisions and to have the opportunity goes a very long ways. And what I've noticed is there's things I don't hear that they hear. They're sitting in different places, they're next to different things. And it's not about being right or wrong. If a kid says, I think that, that note was sharp, and I know that note was flat, I go, well, how do you think you should adjust that? Let's try it again,
Yeah.
and see what you think. Well, we did it again. What do you think? Did it work? Did it get worse? Did it got worse? Well, maybe we need to go in the other direction.
Yep.
Like there's so many ways to do that and engage them, and pretty quickly they start doing that in their minds when you're not talking to them, and that's the goal. That's what makes them really good. That's what makes the band cohesive, or the, whatever the ensemble. I always say band all the time because I got the same problem as all band directors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with the what do you hear, I get to work with pre-service teachers, and I tell them, like, think, pair, share. That works in band too. That works in the music room. Like, just take a minute, quickly tell your stand partner what you heard. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Couple people share out. What did you hear? And just giving them that chance to say to whoever they're sitting next to, well, I thought I heard this. Well, I thought that works in music.
I think a little bit of in-class practice time is nice. Like sometimes I'm working on something, it sounds awful, and I say, listen, this feels like we're not getting anywhere. Let's take 2 minutes and everyone just practice their part here for a minute. And then I walk around the room. If someone's not practicing, I'm like, hey, you doing all right? You need a bottle of water, and just take a moment to engage. Really easy. It's a great rehearsal technique. It almost always results in the next rep being better than the one before. I said, I think it's really easy to start, like, the job of band directing, especially in my state and especially with marching band, is too much job. It is too much. I think we were doing 90 outside of school events a year at my Eastland gig. Like I was driving a school bus at 3 a.m. after working all day because that was the expectation. Like it's too much job. And so the other side benefit to all of this, and again, it's hard at first, but once you get kind of good at it, I think the job actually does become a bit easier because there's so many things you're not doing anymore. The other thing is, and this is really hard for large ensemble directors, but that is exercise having a positive affect. So this means I'm not going to yell at the kids anymore. Like I'm not going to, like I don't need to be an authoritarian to get results, not if I'm laying the right groundwork. And if I have to scream and yell to get things out of the kids, then that means that they're definitely not going to do any of this later. They are going to drop it the first chance they have. And it's going to create this resentment between the kids that I'm upset with and the kids I'm not upset with as seeing each other as obstacles. And again, some people go, well, that's the only way to get results. And I go, maybe for that person currently, that's the only way that they can get results. But I would argue that's a craft issue and not a general principle for life. So a positive affect, that means greeting the kids, taking an interest in what's going on. And we have a lot of kids. So it's high fives and it's, hey, how you doing? And it's walking through a different section each day and doing fist bumps. And it's creating this thing. We're all on the same team. It can't be the director versus the students. And so, if that's a challenge that you have, and I've had times in my life that's been a challenge for me, and so now I try to channel Mr. Rogers most of the time. And again, that's going to turn off some Texas band directors who feel like their job is to be a drill sergeant. But I object,
Yeah.
I think it's really important to exercise that. I think you get better long-term results, especially. And again, you might scare the kids into practicing hard right now, but what are they going to do when they get home? What are they going to do when they leave your class? Are they ever going to do it again? Probably not.
Yeah.
That'd be my starting place.
Awesome. That's perfect. And what we like about these ideas of something you try tomorrow is it's actionable. You can just do it and
Yes. Invitational language. Like, hey guys, let's all head outside. You ready to do this? Like, how do you guys feel about hitting measure 12? Yep, let's go. Right. Measure 12 is such a problem. So like using invitational language whenever possible. The implied thing is, this is doing, but the psychological benefit is I'm being invited in to go and do this thing. And it feels like you're making a choice to go and do it. And at the end of the day, if I have a major objection from somebody about something that I think that we should do, that's a really good opportunity to either bring that kid in or to address something I'm not seeing and to not be scared of having authority questioned a little bit. Again, very scary for people. I'm the band director. You should just do what I say because of who I am. And then we don't understand why the leadership team kids act the same way. you know, uh, being able to, say, hey, this, like, let's question, let's go. I want the next generation to question authority. You know, I don't want them to just accept who's ever in charge. And I mean, that's how the worst atrocities in the history of our planet have happened, is people submitting to authority and just doing their job without question. That's not what we need to get into the future.
No, not going to develop independent musicians either, right? You got to think for yourself.
That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying people be rude or impolite. And sometimes
No.
I think being questioned is someone calling you names or yelling at you. And no, we're gonna have good decorum. That's gonna be one of my hard barriers.
Yeah.
Where, but I'm not afraid of someone saying, I don't think this is right. I think we should do something else.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to be there. Like, that is none of these things are things I did naturally. Everything I learned by running into a barrier head first,
Yep. That's how we learn. Well, this has been so wonderful. Can you let us know, Stephen, how can people contact you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So, excuse me. So I have a personal website. It's stephentcox.com. And sometimes I update that, but it's easy to reach me from there.
Okay.
I work for an organization called the Willis Wonderland Foundation. Their website is williswonderland.org. And by the time that this is published, I will have our full, first round of songwriting curriculum published for free for teachers.
Wonderful.
So the organization I work for, there was this amazing songwriter. Her name was Allie Willis. She wrote September and Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind, and Fire. She wrote Neutron Dance. She wrote the theme song to Friends, the music for The Color Purple. Like, all of those she's credited on. She was amazing. She passed away in 2019, and her will stipulated creating a foundation. I came on with them this last March and started developing a songwriting curriculum for them, because she was a songwriter, and there's virtually no songwriting happening in secondary education. But actually, the barrier for entry for songwriting is very low. Like, 3-year-olds do it all the time. They just walk around singing and writing songs. My kids do it. It's nothing that we should be afraid of. And it's really empowering, and it's cross-curricular, and it's an easy sell. And there's so much room for it. But the world would be better if more people were expressing themselves through music. So the curriculum we do is all free. We do free trainings too. We do free technology gifts. We don't charge for anything. We're a nonprofit. And so we're just trying to help people. And so I'd love to, communicate and direct people to those resources too.
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. We'll make sure we put those links into the show notes. So thank you. Along with the various books and things that you recommended. And they're also going on my Amazon cart in the next few minutes, the ones that I haven't read yet. So I appreciate that.
I highly recommend audiobooks. I run around my house cleaning, doing laundry, figuring out where my kids are, and there's the next psychology book in my ears going, how do I get kids more excited? How do I give them the opportunities they deserve? While actively neglecting my kids. Right. Seems to be the thing. Yeah. But anyway, it's been a pleasure visiting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. For everything. Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.